Hey, SDL, how you doing?
Hey,
Yeah,
I think we might be interrupting Wick's intro.
we just literally just went live on my end to kind of get the
I'm
intro
so
going. It's
sorry.
all good. You know
Excuse
what?
me. Hello,
You were
chat.
you were very quiet all up until the point I needed you to be quiet, and then you were like, "Okay, now it's time."
So
You
sorry. So
sensed it.
sorry.
It's all good. It's all
Okay,
good.
go ahead. Go ahead. It didn't
Oh,
happen. Didn't
thank you.
happen.
Okay, reset. Okay. Well, welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of Wick TV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today we are going to be talking about the most recent election in Argentina. I never thought I would say this, but a major country has an ANCAP for a president. What is that? Is that cause for celebration or despair? We're going to be discussing that today. Who is this guy? What does he do? Are his policies? What do we think of those policies? We're going to discuss it all. Why does he dress up as a furry? We'll find out, okay? We'll find out. But I wanted to give each of my guests here a brief introduction before we get too far into things. And we're going to start in the reverse order on the screen here. We're going to start with PZH, Philosophical Zombie Hunter. Tell people who you are and what your basic thoughts are. Go ahead.
Introducing myself or Milei specifically?
Say who you are and what you think of Milei.
Yeah, so I'm a philosophical zombie hunter. I debate capitalism. I identify as a techno-capitalist. With regards to Milei, I think this is a positive development. I think that it can only help the Argentinian economy. And I think that largely I'm undecided whether Milei's ideas have penetrated the public or that the other side managed the country so poorly that we arrived to the situation we are today.
Okay, well, we'll get into it as we go. Next up, another first-time guest on my show, Corporal Shepard. I'm just going to call you Shepard. Is that okay?
Call me Shepard. You can call me Adrian, whatever.
Sure.
I'm Adrian Shepard. I run the YouTube channel Springtime of Nations. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, so ever since I was a little snot-nosed brat in 2011, Ron Paul supporter, I've hoped for the day that we could have a libertarian victory like this. So yes, I'm very positively inclined towards towards Milei's victory and his incoming administration. Although I do agree with PZH that, or at least I think I agree with him that it's unclear whether or not it's specifically interest in libertarianism as an ideology rather than just frustration with every single other ideology that has been tried in Argentina that's led to this. But either way, I welcome this victory for libertarianism.
Okay, well, we'll see if the rest of the panel welcomes it as well. Karl Marx, do you welcome the ANCAP victory, the libertarian victory?
Not particularly. I think Milei, his ideals sound very destructive. Everything that he's proposed seems disastrously stupid. And the things that he's said in regards to stuff like saying that he'll ally with anyone who's against the left really concerns me. And things like privatizing roads, for example. Like there are a bunch of just terrible, awful, no good policies that will never work out for him. Yeah, that's my belief on that. Should I also introduce myself? Was that also part of it?
Yeah,
or
go
just
ahead.
That?
Who are you?
And I'm Karl Marx. You might know me off Twitter at Ceremonious Art. Going for a little bit of drama right now, but yeah, everything's great.
Okay, well, I'm glad it's great. I'm sure we'll get into it in the not the drama, but the terrible no good policies in the open. But last but certainly not least, Libertarian Destroyer, the bane of ANCAPs, Sock Done Left. Go ahead.
Hey, yeah, I'm Aiden or Sock Done Left. I stream. You can find me on sockdoneleft.org/live. Yeah, I think Milei is going to be terrible for Argentina. if he has his way, it probably will look akin to shock therapy that happened in like the post-Soviet Union. There, he would call for a massive reduction of social spending. He wants to abolish the central bank. He wants to privatize schools. He wants to privatize roads, like Max said. He wants to privatize basically all state-owned companies. And he also believes in Austrian economics. So insofar as he wants to do away with the central bank, he wants to replace all of the standard neoclassical economic theories, which work like okay, and replace them with a theory which actively rejects empirical evidence, to replace them with a theory which is just based on the idea that every action that people take should not be intervened with by the state. It's just non-aggression principle as an economic theory. Completely insane.
Okay, and speaking of completely insane, a friend of mine reached out to me and said that he had been living in Argentina for about 5 years. He still lives there. And so I figured if we were going to talk about Argentinian politics, I kind of had to bring him on too. So we're going to bring on one more guest for this. Ignoring chat. Hello.
Howdy.
Hi, can you turn
Okay,
yourself
everybody.
up?
Up. I am up. Hello, hello, hello. This fine?
Nope, turn yourself way more up.
Coming up.
Okay, as he goes, he's going to be here to tell you whether or not you're full of shit or not. He's the guy who's lived through this. He knows a little bit more about it than I do, so I wanted to have him on to kind of be a bullshit detector for me, if you don't mind. But with that in mind, so this is Ignoring Chat Gang. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. With that in mind, let's talk about his economic policies, right?
So Milei
yeah.
is an anarcho-capitalist.
Well, no, can you tell
that's-
us, Ignoring Chat, can you tell us a little bit about the state of Argentinians' economy right now for the normal person in there? How's it
So
looking?
Argentina has a severe economic crisis. It's right on the edge of complete collapse. I think it has a yearly inflation of over 140%. It is a country right on the edge of collapse, and people are very sick of the status quo that is Peronism that has dominated Argentinian politics for the past 100 or so years. I mean, it seems like 200 years from how people speak of it over here. And the younger generation especially is just completely sick of this disastrous administration and overwhelmingly voted Milei. I think in the 16 to 24 demographic, it's about 70% of the people. People are not happy at all with how Alberto Fernandez, especially his past president, has handled the economy. He did such a bad job, he didn't run, and instead his economic minister won, which is an insane thing to do. I don't understand why they ran that guy in the first place. It seems like they kind of wanted to lose the election by running this guy.
Okay.
So yeah, that's been Argentina. It's been a wild ride these past few years.
Well, yeah, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. But I wanted to ask, right? So given the state that Argentina is in right now with spiraling inflation, right? It's just shooting up. It's been a disaster. I want to ask first to the pro Milei side here. Why is Milei the answer to this? What is his policies going to do that'll fix this? What do you think?
I guess I'll take that. So a lot of the problems that Argentina has right now is to do with Peronism, Peronismo.
Can you elaborate what that is? Peronismo? What does that mean?
Basically, like I can summarize it in 3 main categories. It's high public spending, excessive intervention in the economy, and powerful trade unions. Specifically, with the issue of the inflation, it is the printing of money that the government's trying to fund its spending. It's I'm sure Ignoring Chat can expand more than I can, but it's destroying the country. It's destroying the wealth of the poor. 40% of the country is poor. 10% are homeless.
Mm-hmm.
So it is gone to such a situation that people are suffering so much that they want to try something new or undo it. And
what is Milei going to do to fix it, is my question, I guess.
He's going to cut spending.
Slash public spending with a chainsaw. That's what he wants to do. He wants to slash the state. He wants to gut ministries. He wants to get rid of all the fucking... He wants to privatize everything, pretty much. And that is such a shock solution. I mean, I'll be real. Milei isn't my first choice. He wouldn't be. I can't vote. I'm not a citizen, but he wouldn't be who I would vote for. But I do understand the need for a change, especially a change from the last administration. He said we need to cut public spending by 25% to achieve fiscal balance by 2024, and he says that this needs to be done. Otherwise we're like on the verge of hyperinflation, which is something that a lot of people in Argentina. Argentina's dealt with inflation for a very long time, but also now we have this new generation of Venezuelans as well in the country, and other immigrants who come from countries that have already gone through an economic crisis, and now they're able to vote here, and now they vote for this Milei guy who's the only guy pretty much talking consistently about like we need to stop inflation at its tracks, we need to do something about this.
Hey, why won't that work? I guess to the anti-Milei side. So it sounds reasonable, right? You have hyperinflation going on. You have nothing like all this government spending that's leading towards this. It's helping this. It's crushing the poor. Why will cutting spending not work? Like, isn't there a point where you just have to kind of like say, okay, we just can't afford this?
What I would just first note is that the link between public spending and inflation isn't like an obvious or direct one. The US had, for example, the strongest, largest COVID relief out of every country on Earth. Literally every country on Earth. And it's also had, since then, some of the lowest inflation in the rich world. It's still really high, but it's been lower than literally every other rich country. So, they spent a bunch of money, that must be what causes inflation. It's not so simple. The reason that inflation is happening is if you spend a bunch of money and you don't pay for it by loans or taxes, but you pay for it by printing money. And that's it.
Yeah, and that's what they did, and that's why Milei wants to dollarize to get rid of overspending, to printing more money to pay for public services. You get rid of the central bank, and you don't have that problem anymore. You have the problem now where you're relying on the United States to draft your monetary policy. But it seems like it's a financial reboot, and that's what people voted for more so. Like any outrageous thing he says or about past wars or
seems like
his temperament,
accelerationism,
people look past those things because they want to vote for the reboot, the economic reboot.
Max, what did you mean by accelerationism there?
That people will vote for politicians who'll do catastrophic stuff if they want a catastrophe so they can rebuild something from the ashes. Seems to be the impression I get from the way
that doesn't seem like what Argentines want. Like
no?
when they vote for the economic minister who literally did the disaster.
I don't know. Is the economic minister the guy who's like whole deal is catastrophe, or is it the guy who carries around a chainsaw all the time? Like, let's be real here.
The guy who's carrying on the chainsaw is the guy ranting about the people who are responsible for the catastrophe.
Yeah,
right. But his solution is to take away even more stuff that people could be using to get out of the catastrophe, right? It's getting rid of every
people could be using. But I mean, if you don't have the money to spend, then how is it helping people? I mean, you could help people short term by doing that, and that's what the Massa administration did during their entire term, and they have, his economic ministry did his entire term, and now they have nothing to show for it.
Right. Well, if Milei wants actually to have the money to be able to help his people prosper, then why is his tax policy so shit? How are they even going to have the money to do that then?
Yeah, like if you
go on.
Just if you were really an inflation hawk, you'd keep the taxes. You would cut some of the spending, maybe, but you would just really, really cut down on central bank printing. Like that's what we in the United States. Like Reagan did cut social spending, but inflation went down all over the Western world. It didn't have to come on the back of welfare cuts.
No, I do agree with SDL when we're talking about, yes, there's not a direct relation between social spending and inflation, right? That's kind of like a mystical relationship, right? What's actually going on is governments that are unwilling to raise taxes to fund these things, right? Printing. And that's what the Peronists have done time and time again, right? In and out. Every time they're in power, they give people goodies, but they don't want to disincentivize them for voting for them by raising taxes. And we even saw this year, right, in the election year, the government slashed taxes, right? Which, libertarians, we hate taxes, so we like that. But he was doing it cynically so he could like stay in power, right? And there's no guarantee, one, that will stay the same once the Peronists have secured their majority, and two, that is going to fix these like deep-seated, like unfunded liabilities that Argentina has had for decades.
Yeah, but Adrian, Shepard,
Sure.
do you not think that such extreme actions, and can we acknowledge that the at least proposals by Milei have been extreme to dollarize the economy, to get rid of the central bank, to privatize roads and literally everything? Can we?
I didn't want to do this now, but I was actually surprised, STL, because I saw his tweet talking about these policies, and I figured he was sort of memeing. So I wasn't going to bring it up necessarily unless I had to. But it seems STL unironically thinks that the election manifesto of Milei proposes privatizing all roads in Argentina. And there's a litany of these things that he's talked about, apparently, that Milei has proposed, like privatizing all education or ending the right to unionize. Like, none of this is true. Okay, no one Milei has talked
the
about
organ trade, all that stuff is.
It's just a lie.
He's openly talked about the organ. What do you?
He's not gonna legalize.
One at a time. Let's let Adrian finish, and then I want to hear from ignoring chat, and then I'll let you guys respond, because I'm gonna be real with you. I thought he said that. I saw a New York Times article the other day talking about him legalizing selling your kidney and shit like that, right?
Okay, so
here's an article.
As a public intellectual, he has discussed potentially at some point, based on the ideas of libertarianism, legalizing the sale of organs. He is not running on legalizing the sale of organs as of 2023, and in fact has explicitly denied that he is going to do that at any point in his presidency.
Okay,
he said 50 years from now, maybe he can do it in Ancapistan.
He has anarcho-capitalist brainworms. Like, he's gonna talk about those weird things, but he's not. He has other priorities as a president. He's not gonna even get anywhere near doing anything like that.
So, if you have a link that he says that he's absolutely not going to do it, then I'd love to see that, because everything I've seen on this,
he posted on Instagram specifically, and it was like a litany of things.
He do that? I mean, just think through it logically. Like, nobody.
Why would he do that? He's an ANCAP.
He does.
Well, the idea that he's an ANCAP is also, I think, something that we can.
Okay, he literally did a podcast. He literally did a podcast where
Stockton left. I want to hear from Stockton left. Stockton left. Go ahead. He literally did a podcast.
Okay, so he, on the NCAP thing, he literally did a podcast where he brought out an NCAP flag and explained why he supports the two colors of the NCAP flag. That it's like wealth and black is for freedom or something. He dressed up as Captain ANCAP. He believes in Austrian economics. If he's not an ANCAP, he's like 99% of an ANCAP. What does it fucking matter? Like, come on. If Biden came out with like a Hawksist flag, which you might not know, but it's like some specific brand of communist or whatever, and you were like, why would Biden bring that out? You'd probably think, oh, he's probably a Hawksist or whatever. It's really weird for a libertarian candidate to have an ANCAP flag and like rant about how cool it is if he's not an ANCAP.
He's an ANCAP, but do you think 55% of the people that voted for him are suddenly ANCAPs now because they want to vote for him?
Yeah, let me break this loop by $5 for fondue. If America had the best control over inflation, why would trusting them with your economic policy be a bad thing? And $10 from Lesson Cell to say, Milei is trying to encourage people to sell their organs. He's giving the people the choice to do it if they so want to, as free people. Although I don't think it is good. People do have a right to choose. Zephyr Hash for 100 bits. How dare Argentinians have a say in their own elections? Don't you know the American left disapproves? Shame. Look,
I don't think either of us are saying that.
Yeah, I'm calling for a CIA coup. I support Joe Biden. And what are you talking about?
Look, they gave me money. I say the things. But I wanted to. I know PZH wanted to get in there, so I wanted to get in there. So
yeah.
But before we do. Are you guys saying that he's not actually going to implement ANCAP-like policies, right?
No, not at all. No, he's not. He didn't campaign on those things. Like, there are weird ANCAP brainworms that he has that make him talk about these strange things that I don't support. but he is not campaigning like we must legalize the organ trade. This is my priority. We need to do this. No, he's running like as an economist, and that's why he won as an economist.
Okay.
Not
PZH, go ahead.
So I just wanted to address the point about empirical data. Two things. SDL is saying that he's ignoring the empirical data, which is not true. SDL needs to contend with the fact, and Karl Marx, and contend with the fact that Argentina has 143% inflation, largely due to policies that SDL or Karl Marx would support. Maybe they didn't materialize in the way they would have expected, but in terms of like the category of policies, they're outright something they would endorse. Now, with regards to Milei, I just want to add like some history. Milei started his career as an econometric, which is a very mathematically heavy economics area. And over time, and he was also a professor in university, and he taught economics. And over time, he realized, after churning a lot of numbers, that the principles of the free markets are what actually work, are like what actually improve the economy. So that over time he switched over, and I think in around 2013 he switched over to Austrian economics or Chicago economics, Milton Friedman, Mises, and stuff like that. And he has a lot of knowledge in this area. So saying like flippantly he has no idea what he's talking about from a bunch of people whose policies have caused what Argentina is experiencing now is a bit disingenuous.
Okay, I'm gonna let the accused respond. SDL and Max, go ahead.
The claim isn't that Milei doesn't use empirical data. It's that Austrian economics, as like a foundational thing, rejects the use of empirical data for like evaluating whether a policy is good or bad. They think it all.
Not true.
That's also not true. That is
Okay.
not true.
I can quote you Mises if you'd like, but this is like a central part of Austrian economics. They think that it can be proved deductively from
You
first
don't-
principles that
You don't
everything.
understand what he's talking about.
That is a subset of Austrian economics. That is
That's
Misesian
true.
economics.
It's Misesian economics. And do you want to know which economist Milei has quoted?
What do you mean? You don't think Milei has quoted Israel?
Okay, if again, this would be if someone had like started quoting Karl Marx or something, you'd be like, hey, maybe they're completely Marxist, but at least there's a little bit Marx in there.
No. But
Come on.
PZ pointed out Milei is a great admirer of Milton Friedman as well. He is not an Orthodox Austrian at all by any means. He and if you just take a quick look at even his like Wikipedia page, to say nothing of like the actual articles he's written about Austrian or economics, it does not have an a Mises Institute flavor. By no means. He is not. He has never taken on praxeology as his like guide. Like there are people, especially in America, in the economics world, who are of this milieu, and actually, I would say I find myself among them. But Milei specifically has a very heterodox approach. He kind of mixes both of them. The closest kind of economics view that is closest to is the people from like George Mason University in America, like Brian Kaplan, people who think Austrians, Hayek, Mises are useful and interesting, but they don't think that praxeology is like come from on high to guide all their economic principles. And like P said, he was an econometrics guy for a long time. He understands that empirical data matters. So I think again, this is another, and this was from SDL's like original litany, and I think basically all of it was a lie of things about Milei that he didn't like.
So if the defense here is just that he's half praxeology or quarter praxeology or 10th praxeology, that's still really goddamn bad. Like I just being completely blunt.
Marxists use logic too. You know, Marxists use deductive.
Using logic is not the problem. It's thinking that you can derive logic from first principles that's the problem. Like that's actually a big problem with Marxism too.
Just answer the question.
What question?
Yeah,
I
Just
said,
answer the accusation.
well, I did. I said that even if he's a 10th praxeologist, that's dumb as shit.
Okay, what about
Do you
the
think
fact
if someone
that,
was 10th
what-
Marxist that would be bad?
It depends on which 10th, but all of praxeology, like unless the parts of praxeology they're taking are just like the standard Austrian theory, then There's nothing unique about it. I don't know. I don't want to
Okay.
go too deep.
Okay, okay.
pulling back-
My chat. No one knows the terms you're using. No one understands praxeology. No one understands the Mises Institute. Right? They aren't deep. They're like, there's tons of messages. What the fuck is going on? What
Yeah,
the
we
fuck
can
is
move
being
on.
talked about? So let's ground the conversation here. What is your? And I want to direct this first to Max, if I may. Max, what is your biggest fear when it comes to which policy that has been proposed do you think, by Milei specifically, do you think is going to be the most harmful and why to the people of Argentina?
I don't know which one specifically I would pick. There's quite a few.
What comes
I
to
mean, we
mind when
can-
you hear Milei's policies are bad? Which policy comes to just on the top of your head?
Probably the elimination of like most of the government ministries, right? That seems like a very bad thing, kind of just destroying all possible like governmental development there.
Why?
We don't have money. We can't
Because
afford
they
them.
should. You can't afford them. Well,
We
you
can't
should
aff-
probably not
we're-
then like not tax them, not tax people, right? I don't know. It's like to like entirely get rid of them, rather than to just try and maybe fund them a little less and try and be more fiscally responsible.
That's what Macri
Seems
tried
like a
to do.
bad
I mean,
choice.
Macri tried to be like this slow kind of incrementally changing or fiscally like adjusting things. I mean, he took in the IMF loan in the first place to help balance the budget and help balance things out. In that sense, didn't fucking work. I mean,
Okay,
that
so one
approach has
guy
been
does it wrong
tried.
doesn't mean you can't do it right, though, right?
The problem is the politicians, and that's why people voted to get rid of the politicians and get rid of like public spending as much as possible. Because there's another thing we haven't talked about really is the levels of corruption that are in Argentina, and the power that an outsider like Milei has, like standing up to those powers that have plundered and sacked and looted the country. I mean, that's the real reason people don't want people in these ministries with like overinflated wages calling the shots anymore. They just want to dump the thing and just let the private sector take it over. And also because we can't afford them in the first place. We don't have money.
I think Carl, and maybe you're just laboring under like just a false impression of Milei's policies. He's not like saying like eliminate all government ministries, okay? And even the ones that he wants to like get rid of as like ministries, he's trying to like consolidate into other ones. So, for example, when people saw that he eliminated the women gender diversity ministry, that actually doesn't mean that like the government doesn't play a role in like what it was doing before. He's consolidating it under another department, the Department of Human Capital. He's just trying to downsize. It's not an outright elimination of, as far as I know. There's no there's no department, as far as I know, that is just completely like the government goes from like a significant role to zero role in people's lives. It's like you said, trimming the fat.
So I know that he proposed a 15% cut in public spending altogether and abolishing the central bank. Those would seem to be like the two biggest problems that we'd be talking about. Like that's a really large cut, and it's worth considering. Like a lot of that spending is going to poor people who tend to consume more, tend to be really key for keeping businesses running. One of the central points of post-Keynesian and Keynesian economics is that when you cut people's wages, they consume less shit, and that can spur recessions. That's why like it's really bad to have a high unemployment rate. That's why it's good to keep as many people as employed as possible. When you cut public spending, you do the opposite of that, and that too can drive inflation.
How can they buy anything when inflation is 143%?
You can't unless your wages are keeping up. But that seems like an argument for stopping the money printer or like focusing on monetary policy, because
that's what he wants to do by dollarizing. Essentially, he wants to stop the money printer, stop the money machine, man.
Sure, but he doesn't just want to do that. He also wants to abolish the central bank. Like he wants to go far beyond even just dollarizing and trying to reduce inflation.
It's extreme.
Just real quick, I want to ask Stockton left this because people say in here abolish the central bank. Can you explain a little bit what that entails, what that means?
I don't know his specific proposal, but the way it worked in the U.S. when there wasn't a central bank is that like it doesn't quite work, because he's basically just giving a lot of the functions over to the dollar. So I don't know what the role of central bank would be in a dollarized country. So it's hard to say.
Why
If
why is tying their economy to the dollar bad then?
It could be good or bad. This is the thing that I said. I would love to hear some more solid empirical research on, which I haven't been able to find. Like
We're
whether
gonna find
dollarized.
out in Argentina. That'll be our case study. But go ahead.
Well, hold on. We have a bunch of
With case
examples.
study.
Well, no, I want
Salvador.
Stockton left to finish, and then I'll let you guys respond. Go ahead.
My point was just it could be good if it cuts inflation. It could be bad if it hands over control to the United States, just because different inflation levels and independent monetary control can increase growth when a country can pursue like the optimal policy. Clearly, Argentina is not pursuing that policy, so the benefit might be that it's pursuing the U.S. policy, which is still better than what they're currently pursuing. Like even if it's not the best, it still could be better than what they're doing right now. That's the argument.
Why is that wrong?
Well, he's just saying he's not sure. I think,
Fair enough.
which is
So
fair.
there are, I just want to say
there
something
are
quickly, and then
examples of
Shepard.
countries in Latin America dollarize. I mean, Ecuador, El Salvador, and
Panama.
You see El Salvador. I mean, this guy has I forget his name, but he has a 85% approval rating.
That mostly seems to be because he's mass locking up people, and the murder rate's really dropping. But
Milei
He
kind of-
he didn't dollarize. to be clear, I think
okay.
I think El Salvador dollarized in the 2000s.
I think it's also important to mention that the countries that have dollarized in Latin America have had the lowest inflation in the entire continent.
Mhm. Seems like a thing that would really help Argentina.
It does.
I did
don't
just
know.
to bring back for a second though, like this whole like, oh, is he's in Austria so if you want to know the Orthodox Austrian position on dollarization, just type in dollarization Mises Institute, and they don't like it. So this idea that he's in lockstep with praxeology or whatever is not true. And SDL actually, maybe you would agree with the Mises Institute guys, because they're saying if interest rates are not actually in tune with the natural market processes, then everything can go out of whack, which I think is a fair point. But Milei seems to think differently, and a lot of Latin American countries seem to have benefited from dollarization.
I want to look. We've all seen the interviews with Milei, and he says and does some pretty wild shit, right? He memes a lot. Again, he dressed up as Captain ANCAP or some shit, right? I guess my question is,
General ANCAP.
do we not think that shows, at least in Argentina, I know he isn't running on some of these more extreme policies, but is it not fair to be worried that because he has these sort of predilections, he would implement them if given the opportunity and chance, right? Do we not think that's a fair concern to have?
I think that's fair. I think it's a reasonable long-term concern. And hey, I mean, there are things in his policies that I don't agree with. I mean, he's pro-life. I'm not. I don't agree with that. But I just think that people have other priorities right now, and their priorities are stopping inflation before it leads into hyperinflation. So, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not. I don't think libertarian is. I don't think throwing guns around, and letting everyone be able to own a gun would be necessarily a good thing in Argentina. I mean, there are aspects of his policies that I don't agree with, but it's just you have to prioritize.
Would you have voted for him if you could? I know you're not a citizen, so you can't vote there, but you live there, right?
Yeah, I would have voted for Patricia Bullrich, which was the more moderate opposition candidate in the first runoff, but then the second runoff, when it was just Milei and Massa, I would have voted for Milei just because I can't fathom voting for the current economics minister. I mean, that's like economic suicide to me.
I wanted to just say that I realize that he can appear eccentric at times, but he is very passionate and he's very principled. I mean, putting specific policies aside for a second, he is very principled. He does have good ideas, and he does care a lot about morality and ethics and how they apply to government, which is a little bit refreshing when you bring things like to core principles and ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very pious. He's I see like the only clips that are like that go around like in American Twitter are where he's yelling about leftards and just foaming at the mouth. That's like not how he campaigned most of the time here. Most of the time when he was campaigning, he had his moments like that, but it was mostly throwing shit at the politicians and throwing shit at the people responsible, rather than just generally ranting about leftards.
Let's. Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, maybe that's a bias that we get in the North. I mean, there's like the Afuera clip that was referenced in chat by people that he was like, here's all the ministries I'm going to get rid of, right? And like, there's a very famous clip that people are quoting positively where it's the one where he brings out the NCAP flag and he's talking about putting the state up like your mother's cunt or whatever.
That's just how we speak. We're potty mouths here.
Nah, king. Okay, no opposition for that. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think that seriousness is really the concern for me. It's that he seems to want to doing shock therapy. He wants to try and do what like IMF wanted to do in a lot of countries, what we did in like the former Soviet Union in Russia, and that turned out extremely poorly. Like,
not all of it.
Well, it turned out less bad in the places that did the slowest privatizations.
No. The Baltic states did the fastest and the most overhaul is what happened in the Baltics, and to a large extent in Poland too. And those countries are
Poland had already begun the process of shifting towards even back in the 80s, so it was slower. But like within the former Soviet Union, the ones that did slower,
they were able to start earlier, but it was a total cleansing in Russia, in Belarus, in Kazakhstan. All these countries, privatization was going at a turtle's pace. It's by no means shock therapy what happened there.
There are, I mean, I without getting too much into the empirics on this, there are literally studies which compare the rate of privatization to the depth of the decline during the recession that followed the collapse of the Soviet Union. And it
is also worth looking into how privatization was done, right? Like in Russia, obviously, like one of the big problems was, oligarchs, basically people who were like commissars in the Soviet Union had the political clout to basically amass their own little fiefdoms like during this period, right? And that didn't happen in other countries. And that's an important thing to consider.
Do we think that Argentina is going to be like an uncorrupt, clean privatization?
Well, first of all, we're not transitioning fully from a state-owned, state-run economy. Privatization happens all the time in mixed economies, right? And most of the time, there's increases in productivity from them.
I mean,
I think with regards to corruption specifically, when you take power away from politicians, or when money doesn't flow through politicians or through bureaucrats, to some degree you reduce corruption because they don't have that leverage to ask for money from people. And I think Georgia did something similar. They fired half the bureaucrats, or they fired like a large chunk of the police, and they said every time there's a bureaucrat standing between you and opening a business, or between you and getting a license for something. I'm not exactly sure what. That's exactly the concept what you were saying. That's an opportunity for someone to get bribed. So if you don't have those things that stop you, the market is freer. And let's just take like something that Milei is saying when he says the party is over, with regards to politicians and this like high class of politicians that are scamming the country for money. What does that mean to you, SDL?
I think that it means that, again, probably from Rothbard, he thinks there's two classes of people, those who pay taxes and those who take taxes, and he wants to kick the second group off as much as possible. That's why he wants to cut public spending. He thinks that's the reason for inflation. That's my assumption.
Well, what does the party's over mean to you?
Mainly.
The party's over means that he wants to cut the social spending and to privatize as much as he can.
Specifically to the people who have control of that money and decide where it goes.
Yeah,
if they can keep some of it for themselves, and who their friends are, they'll give it to them. That's what he's referring to.
That's what we're referring to the same thing. You're saying that he's going to privatize it. Go ahead.
You're saying cut public spending. That's what he's talking about. No, he's saying that the corruption involved in these high-level positions is over. Like the corruption involved in helping.
Yes, but how is he going to do that?
Friends.
What is his anti-corruption program? It's cut the program. That's the point. Just with some numbers before we get too far away from it. Argentina is one of the 50% most corrupt countries in the world. Not super corrupt, but as corrupt by the Corruption Perception Index as Colombia, Brazil, Ethiopia. So like not a particularly clean country. It's a little bit better than Russia. But like, I don't know. I don't know that I would trust a privatization. It's also one of the more unequal countries on earth already. So there's already like wealthy and powerful rich people who I assume are going to be the ones first in line to get privatized.
They're the ones that were connected.
Okay, $5 from Zephyr Hash to ask, can the pro-Milei folks tell us exactly what will be privatized and why that is good? That's a very good question. We're talking about privatizing the economy. Explain what will be privatized.
The only thing on the docket, as far as I'm aware, the only thing other than to a certain extent you could argue like, oh, the central bank, because its powers are going to be devolved to like commercial banks. But the only thing really like Milei is like dead set on is privatizing the Argentinian airlines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's funny, and I am curious to hear what Max and SDL think about the way that Milei is proposed to privatize them, which is not actually, first of all, not the Russian style, and not even like the Baltic style, but actually what Murray Rothbard proposed, which actually has a lot more in common with syndicalism, right? A leftist kind of thing where workers, the people who actually worked at a firm, are given equal shares to the company.
Explain how that's going to work with just for my audience and my understanding, explain how that's going to work with, briefly, please, concisely, with the Argentinian airlines. Are the workers just going to be given shares of the airlines and then run it like a co-op? What are you talking about?
They literally could. Now, I feel like they probably won't want to do that, but they will be able to vote on how that's actually done because they have shares and therefore they have a vote or several votes when it comes to like the democratic process.
A democratic process on how to privatize voted on by the workers of that company. Why do you guys think that's bad, Max and SDL?
Yeah, why is that bad?
Do you want to go, Max? Or
Max is muted. Max is trying.
You can go ahead.
I'm not opposed to handing I think it's interesting if he genuinely wanted to do this as like a give the shares over to workers. The main just what happened in part in the Soviet Union is something akin to this, is that people were given shares in firms, but they sold those shares off at usually pennies on the dollar to the ultra rich because they were in really harsh economic circumstances. It's not hard to see something like that happening again in Argentina. Again, for reference, I mentioned it's one of the most unequal countries on earth. It is more unequal than Russia currently is. That's with the oligarchs that took power after the insanely corrupt privatization.
Here's the difference, though. Okay, so there's some similarity in some sense to the privatization of Russia, but an important part is that these are general shares. Okay, so when Russia privatized a lot of its industries, they weren't given like 100% to the workers. There was a certain share that was indeed allocated specifically to workers of large firms. But a lot of it was general shares that was broken up over, against the entire populace, which is super diffuse. You can't run a company with 100 million shares, right? And people quickly sold that because if you have a 100 millionth of Gazprom, that's going to get you $50 maybe, right? That it's a very diffuse way of selling off things, and it led to like rich people with clout, aka the oligarchs, the socialist oligarchs, being able to amass these fiefdoms, these oligarchies during shock therapy. But that is not what Milei's proposing. He's proposing specifically, you have 100,000 shares company and you have 50,000 employees. They get 2 shares and they're able to vote on who gets to be CEO, or no one gets to be CEO, or they can sell it to their neighbor, or they can sell it to someone rich if they want. But I think this is very different. This is very different from the shock therapy, quote unquote, that happened in the.
So
the most important thing about doing that is then politicians won't be able to use the company as their personal bank account, as they've been doing with the overinflated wages that they generally have in companies like this. That's why they're actually hesitant to privatize.
I just want to add to the point of the corruption. Normally, in general, to reduce corruption, you increase transparency. you reduce bureaucracy, and typically, if you want to take a more like empirical approach, you increase all the variables that increase on the property rights index and all the economic freedom index. So once you do those things, corruption can go down, and right now Argentina is very poor on those metrics as well. So if you improve those metrics, if you increase transparency, if you reduce bureaucracy or people who have access to deny you certain things, so you have to bribe them. If you reduce those things, you reduce corruption. Now, another point I want to ask SDL, you're saying it's unequal, but we're talking about economic growth and improving the economy of the country. What does it necessarily matter if we'll have increased inequality? And I'll give an example. In the case of Georgia, they had a period where they had 10% year-on-year growth of their economy, and they had a more unequal economy in terms of wealth and income, but people obviously, maybe the distribution didn't spread equally across all the people, but people were richer, significantly richer than they were before. So what does it matter if it is unequal?
So inequality matters first because more equal economies generally lead to a lot better things in terms of educational outcomes, like long-term growth. There's a term sometimes pointed to, difference between high wealth and high development countries. If you want a high development country, you need educated people who have the resources to access human capital and whatnot. It's hard to get that in a really, really, really unequal country, which is part of the reason that South America has stayed poor, because even though they do a lot of government spending, they still remain really, really, really unequal. The resources necessary for people to get ahead are really far away. More broadly, I would note on the stuff like transparency, if you're pointing to indices like those produced by Heritage or whatever, they're mostly bullshit because they actually include the corruption perception index in their indices of like how right or left wing a government is. So that's just like intentionally juking the stats. But if you look at the countries which perform best on corruption perception index, they are the rich social democracies. Sweden, Norway, whatnot are some of the most transparent, least corrupt countries on earth, and yet they have some of the highest social spending. Apparently, all these bureaucrats aren't corrupt in those countries because it's not just about bureaucrats, it's about state capacity and anti-corruption measurement. Like, it's not so simple as like less government, less corruption. It's the opposite of what we observe, actually.
So let me reply. So both the countries that you mentioned as that have low corruption have a very high economic freedom index and a very high property rights index.
Yeah, because the economic freedom index includes the corruption. Go ahead.
And hold on.
But there's other things involving this, like, and you can just look up their tax rate and stuff like that, right? Or ease of doing business, which has nothing to do with heritage.
Because the ease of doing business, the ease of doing business one is literally a measurement of how many forms you have to fill out. No, I want to be clear on this one.
Don't really understand.
Understand
what you're talking about this.
The ease of business index that you're referring to here from the World Bank is literally a measure of how many forms you fill out to create a business. And the US does particularly poor because you have to fill out a federal, state, and local form. Like, I'm not joking about this. It is such a bad... No. But that's not a real measure of the real burdens to, like, setting up a business. Like, the actual administrative burdens are so much more than...
There's also a lot of money you have to spend.
Well, that's an example. Measuring fees would be a really good example, but they don't actually measure fees. It is literally just how many forms you fill out.
No, that's an example of 1 of 1,000 consideration. And you're the ones talking about empirical data. You're the one talking about empirical data here. I'm surprised you'll deny it. Now, if you could just let me finish just for a second. So... Actually, you know what? I'll let you finish. Go ahead. What's wrong with these metrics that I'm providing?
Yeah, if you decompose the economic freedom index into like its sub indices, the only ones that actually correlate with economic growth are the ones. I think it's like do you have low inflation? Do you have low corruption? And one third one that I'm forgetting. It's none of the ones about property rights or whatever. So like,
I actually do agree with SDL. The heritage is just bunk because you can't look at like what they're actually looking at. Fraser is better, but not perfect. But
what about the property rights index itself?
I haven't looked into the property rights index, so I can't say.
Well, Argentina is low on that, and the Nordic countries it references are high on that. So wouldn't it be a good idea to increase the underlying things for that? And also, with regards for your inequality, you're making a fundamental mistake, and I don't think you're looking into the data. The inequality specifically that you're referring is to developing countries. That they are, if they are unequal and developing, then that could mean that there's a high degree of corruption and people aren't having access to certain things. But if they're developed already, then the inequality doesn't even matter. And even to some degree of inequality in a developed country can actually lead to more growth.
Well, the empirical correlations there are the opposite, that even in rich countries, more wealth and more income inequality leads to yet less growth. It's just a question about access.
No, that's not true. That is not true.
Think about it like this.
I looked at the data myself.
There are millions of potential business creators out there who don't have the means to do so because they don't have enough income, they don't have enough access to credit. But in a more equal society, they are more able to do so. There's more ability for people to rise up based on merit in a more equal society.
The financial markets have plenty of ways of getting credit to people who can justify that they're going to grow a business.
Okay, but that's not what we actually observe.
Listen, with respect, I feel like we're kind of going around in circles here. Maybe we can move on to something else.
Okay, so you're just bored of this particular topic. I got more, gang. I got more. Trust me. Let's talk about Falklands.
Yes.
Milei has said a few things.
Yeah.
What do we think of that? I want the pro-Milei people to go first on this. He does seem kind of hawkish when it comes to the Falklands. No?
All right. Here's the thing. Only if you take him out of the context of all his predecessors. Okay, so in Argentina, this is like the third rail of Argentine politics. You cannot say that the Falklands are British in Argentina as a politician. You just can't. I'm confident Ignoring Chat will agree with me on this.
Yeah, I wanted to absolutely. That's the case. I mean, it's like you have to believe in God to be president in America. It's like basically like one of those things you cannot be in favor of the Falklands being Argentine. That's it's a non-starter.
So what I will say is the statements Milei has made about the Falklands puts him into a relatively dovish camp, though. So even when he was just like a talking, my Argentine friend told me this. He said that he thought it was disgusting how many Argentinian young men were killed for this, even though they obviously were not prepared to fight a world power like Britain during the Falklands War. And his current statements, it's funny. One of my other friends was like, "Oh, this guy is going to invade the Falklands," and I look. It's like a Daily Mail headline. Milei wants to invade again or something like that. And you actually look into his actual statements. He is very clear about this. War is never on the table again for getting back the Falklands. What Milei has talked about, and his advisor has said as well, his foreign policy advisor, that what he hopes for is kind of like a Hong Kong deal, where peacefully, Britain and the people in the Falklands will actually want to be part of Argentina. But he admits that this could take decades. In my opinion, there is no danger of a new Falklands War under Milei.
Okay.
Also, I mean, and again, like I think this is also in another thing. He got a lot of flack for defending Margaret Thatcher, right? As this like economic and strong woman, like conservative or whatever. And during the debates, he was attacked because, how could you? I mean, the war crimes that were committed during the Falklands, referring to it was a Belgrano, right? The cruiser Belgrano that was torpedoed, and this is a big, Argentine nationals will make a lot of hay. It's like, technically, it was out of the realm of battle, so it was a war crime to do. But
basically, what you're saying,
the big picture is he's taken actually a lot of flack for being too dovish, and I think he in reality is dovish on the Falklands.
Do we what is your stance on this, Sucked Left? Your buddy Carl, I guess his internet died. Either that or he was like, fuck this, I'm out. I don't know which. But you're kind of on your own here. What are your thoughts on the Falklands situation? Do they differ substantially from our friend Adrian's here?
No, I mean, everything that I've read about what he said has been that it's pretty moderate for Argentine politics. Like, it's not a super nationalist position. So
okay. Then we'll move on to the next question, I guess.
I mean, unless he wants to use it as like a legal organ transport base or something. I don't think that he's going to have a need to take it over.
Yeah, that'll be the island of Encapistan.
That's coming. Right there.
That's second term stuff.
Gotcha. So, at least in the States, we have heard many comparisons, or I have heard many comparisons, between Milei and Trump. Being that Milei ran as a drain the swamp kind of guy, get rid of corruption. He also ran as someone who was kind of a little bit of a meme in a lot of circles, right? I'm curious though on what this says about the state of populism, at least in the world. Do we think that this is at least a worrying sign that populism might be on the rise in South American countries, or do we think this is again just an artifact of the guys before him were just so bad that they vote in literally anyone other than
I, I have I have a theory.
Populism is on the rise.
Okay,
Completely.
what do you think? And then I want to hear from
So I was
people in
talking
chat.
I was talking on your server, Wick, and people were saying that he's a populist, and I was at the time I agreed with them, but then I looked into it, and I don't exactly agree that he is a populist, because it would be like saying that your friend and mine, Scott from Fabian Liberty, is in a populist position, which is not true. In fact, you could say that Argentinians voted for some degree of economic pain in the short term to fix a long-term problem. So it doesn't feel necessarily like it's populist, and the Peronist side would be categorized as leftist populist, just by definition, economic policies. So I think it's just people losing faith in the system, people losing faith in the economic system and the democratic system, and that's what brought this about. And in other countries as well. I mean, I'm in the UK. We don't have a lot of faith in our politicians. We don't have a lot of faith in the policies they pass. So it seems like a global or Western problem, let's say.
Ignoring chat, you
Yeah.
had some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was gonna say populism is rising all over the world, but in Latin America, especially with the levels of corruption that exist in the region, it's like double. I mean, it double down on that. People like Milei, Bolsonaro, these characters just are able to rise because the other party is so corrupt. I mean, that's the only reason people like these are ever able to win elections. And the difference between Trump and Milei is kind of a intelligent. He's like an intellectual in a sense where he actually he reads economic theory. I mean, he's a professor at university, worked at banks. He's very accomplished in his field, and he's able to communicate economic ideas in a way that is very, very appealing to Argentine people. I mean, there's clips of him explaining like these obscure economic concepts, and you just see like the talk show guy who's interviewing him just being like blown away, like, wow, this guy's going to be president. I mean, he's been in the media sphere for a very long time. He's been kind of getting this cult of personality like Trump, and he was able to propel that into victory.
Yeah, I think that it's sort of odd in one sense to call Milei populist, because usually populists do the sort of like anti-tax, pro-spending policies, or they tend to be like very strong social conservatives. Milei has like an odd amount of social conservatism for an ANCAP, right? Like the abortion ban, but he wasn't running on social conservatism. He was running on like austerity fundamentally. I will say that in the context of Argentina, I think you could argue that it fits another idea of populism, which is anti-elite. Like we even had it in this conversation. It's the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats are the reason for the corruption. Got to get rid of the bureaucrats. They're the ones really running the country. And when you empower me, I'll get in there and I'll clean house and I'll drain the swamp. And I think by that definition, you could argue that it's populist. But like, again, I don't know that this context works for every other country. Not all Latin American countries are seeing inflation of like 100%. Not all Latin American countries are, like in a lot of countries, the populists run on like, hey, we are some of the most unequal countries on earth. Please put me in and I will try and redistribute the wealth so that we aren't that anymore. And the rich don't run the country. So different elites, I guess.
Perhaps.
I will say, I think on balance, anti-populist versus non-populist, Milei has run on a populist platform for his run. But it is worth pointing out that basically Argentine politics has been dominated by populists since the end of World War II. The Peronists, starting with Perón himself in 1946, have done this, elites versus the people thing, and even say, to a certain extent, the orthodox Peronists, capitalism and socialism have both failed us. And that we need this new third way. They wouldn't call themselves third positionists because that's bad optics. But that's basically the kind of like orthodox Peronist line. And then you get the Kirchnerists in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they're just they're rebranding left-wing populism. It's the corrupt bankers. The IMF is screwing us over by giving us free money, but not telling us exactly what to do or whatever. So Milei, yes, is a populist, but I feel like Argentina has been so just burned over by populist waves like for the past 70 years that it's not a growth of populism. It's just it's a new brand. And personally, I like it because it's oriented in my favor, whereas most Peronism, most flavors of Peronism were oriented against the market, against private property, etc. But I wouldn't say it's a growth. That's all I'll say.
Okay, interesting. Do we know, and this is an actual question I don't know, how this will affect Argentinians' relationship to the surrounding countries and the neighboring regions? Ignoring chat, you mentioned how Argentina has had an influx of Venezuelans and other people from other countries, right? Do we see this becoming the norm? Are people going to flock to Argentina now? Or what is his position when it comes to the greater Latin America in that sphere?
So he doesn't want the state to deal with communist countries. Like he doesn't want direct deals with Venezuela or Brazil or China or Russia for that matter. Not just communist, authoritarian. He doesn't want to deal with authoritarians. And he says that the private sector is still going to be able to, do whatever sorts of businesses that they want, but the state, no, not anymore. He doesn't want to deal with authoritarian states.
Is that a marked difference in change in foreign policy, or is that just kind of more of the same?
That's huge. I mean, that's pretty extreme. I've never seen a country that just flat out says we're not going to deal with China anymore. I would think a country like Argentina especially would not be making those kind of extreme moral positions given, where we're at. But you can't say he's not a principled.
Okay. How do we think?
I will say something. So I'm not saying that what Ignoring Chat said is not true. He did say that, right, in the lead up to the election. But since becoming president-elect, he's moderated a lot of these foreign policy stuff. He's invited Lula to his inauguration. He accepted congratulations from Xi Jinping. I mean, I think that if the policy now Argentina for a long time, for maybe 20 years or so, has been very involved in BRICS aligned stuff, kind of anti-American third world stuff, in terms of large long-term public works projects, including stuff like nuclear reactors or whatever. So if Argentina decouples from that, I'm not that worried about it. I was initially worried about, if you break off trade with two of your biggest trading partners, obviously that's going to cause a lot of suffering. You need a good justification for that, and I just don't think that Argentina had one when Milei was juggling this kind of thing. But it seems like Milei is kind of, and he's admitted that, listen, I'm a pragmatist, I'm a reformist. These things have to be done slowly. So, when it comes to trade with China, trade with Brazil, I mean, Argentina
You don't see that changing much anytime soon. Then is what you're saying?
It doesn't seem like it, because he's already
he has moderated himself a lot since losing the first runoff. I mean,
one of the
how much do we think that is just to win? like very bluntly.
Well, that is a good question, right? But if it was only during that period between the first round and the second round, I would agree with you, SDL. But he's moderating after the second round win, so he already has the presidency, and he's
Sure, but
already like congratulate. He's inviting Lula, like Lula's who he called like the Antichrist or whatever. He's inviting him back, and like when people were like asking him, it's like, well, one has to be pragmatic when they're president or what.
So this is something it sounds like we agree on, is that the actual practice of running the government is going to moderate any of this. Like he's not, doesn't matter that they elected an ANCAP president in Argentina. Argentina's not going ANCAP because he only has 30 seats in the parliament. So he's got to work with the moderates essentially.
True. I will say that is true, but Argentina has a very strong presidency, so a lot can get done without the Congress.
Well, and a lot of it,
true.
A lot of that seems to be the privatizations and whatnot, and I assume some of the government reorganization and maybe redirection of funds. So I don't know. To me, that seems bad, assuming the privatization does go poorly, or like another thing that's worth noting, if he really wanted to do hyper austerity and bring down inflation, he would just sell the companies. If you're selling it to the workers, they can't afford to pay you. If you're giving the shares away, then you're not getting enough money to like pay down inflation.
Yeah. Not only is he like not selling it, but he's saying he's going to support during the privatization process, he's funding a year of the whatever the function of
capital.
companies. Yeah.
Like if true, that's good. It also just means that the one thing that was presented is the from the argument from the moderate here that like he's worth voting for because the situation is so bad that he's like in some sense failing to do that correctly, right? Like he's not getting the maximum value.
I don't think the general I don't think that his main thing was like I will sell every asset in Argentina to fund the government. I don't think that's what he's trying to do.
Sure, but then what's the cut in social spending going to look like, right? Because like he's still going to cut something, and that means that he has even less funds to do so. So it's just
before we get into that, if I can just answer Wick's question, and then we can do your one SDL. So
remind me the question, Wick.
I was talking about how Argentina's foreign policy is going to be shaped and changed, and what that looks like for the region going forward.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll do it. Then you can answer after. So I would like to take a more idealist position based on what Milei has said. So I look at it in two ways. One is economic and one is political. So from an economic point of view, if you dollarize the economy, you incentivize trade and investment from outside of Argentina into it. So you can have investment in new businesses, increases in productivity, new jobs, higher wages, things of that nature, just by dollarizing the economy. And depends also if he removes barriers. But just the fact that you are continuing to use dollar when you come into Argentina, that makes it a lot easier to invest in Argentina, which is a very, very important for them at this point. And the political foreign policy one, I do like that Milei is saying that he wants Argentina to be a moral lighthouse, that he wants Argentina to do the right thing and to prove that once they do the right thing, it works out in reality. And the thing that it reminds me of is kind of like what America has done. America's claim to fame in terms of foreign policy is a shining city on a hill. They did things right. They got very rich. Their citizens are very happy, or to some degree. But it's the shining city on a hill. So that could be what Argentina will be for Latin America. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's probably going to further isolate Venezuela, which I don't think sanctions are a very effective way at changing governments. Like, it doesn't seem to have changed governments around the world. So insofar as he's considering something sanctioned-like, it doesn't seem effective. Broadly, more cooperation between countries seems more likely to bring about positive changes. And I don't know how Venezuela gets free and fair elections, but probably not disengagement. So, like,
Amen.
Yeah. I think he's doing a good job with that, but then the country went back on its word and started interfering in the latest opposition primaries.
Yeah. So
but nevertheless, I think I'm just glad Argentina doesn't much of an influence on the stage. So, whether or not Milei is bad on foreign policy, I think is largely irrelevant.
I will say one very minor thing that Milei is bad on is Israel. He wants to move the capital or the embassy of Argentina to Jerusalem during all this.
But again, and ST
mostly minor thing.
Yeah, you and I agree on this, but thankfully, Argentina is not like the headline power on. So whether or not they move their embassy, it's like Palau moving their embassy. Who cares?
I think it does indicate that his broader part of the broader point here would just be he's signaled a very strong pro-Western sentiment. Like he's signaled that he wants to be very strong pro-US, pro-Israel, pro-Europe, which like for good and for bad
is amazing, right? You approve, right?
For all the
Sorry.
good.
Yeah, I was afraid that PZL being an objectivist, but
Wait,
I think
hold on.
maybe
If I may,
yes.
What is wrong with being pro-Western?
Yeah.
Like you keep saying for good or for ill. Give us the ill.
The good of it is that the Western countries tend to be more democratic. The ill of it is that they also tend to be like the world's hegemons, insofar as they still remain. And they generally use that to do stuff like forcing IMF loans onto countries, which tend to do shock therapy type effects. Part of the reason, again, that South America has seen such poor growth over the past 20, 30 years is that the way the IMF loans have been rolled out, the way that privatization has rolled out, the way that social cuts have rolled out has, again, meant that not only are Latin American countries poor, but they are undeveloped. They aren't building up the human capital needed to become developed.
It's a bit late for the IMF loans to Argentina because literally a third of the IMF loans are just to Argentina.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, here's the thing. I'm sympathetic to Al's position on this kind of thing. But I will say, I mean, when the IMF is issuing these kinds of loans, the Chinese do the same thing, and except that it's even more long term. And now we've seen like Sri Lanka has gotten ill of the Chinese like creditors. But I think a good way to think about this is like a good way to like head off like these kind of like. Basically, Greece was like the big poster boy for a long time, right? Of like, getting crucified by the IMF. But a good way to not fall foul of IMF debt slavery is not to need it in the first place. And if you kept your books good, you didn't need IMF loans, and you only need to look across, the Rio Plata. Uruguay didn't need IMF loans, right?
Yeah, I mean,
didn't need them. Like, what is uniquely bad about other than that it had certain ideologies at a certain time that thought that just spending frivolously to get elected was the way to go.
Yeah, so I've agreed that's a pretty bad policy. I guess I'm like what I would point to is that the Latin American story of like basically doing a bunch of spending but not being able to fully pay for it, having high corruption and bad government structure is like a very low growth story that sort of led to this low growth stasis now. But again, one of the opposites is like East Asian countries. All of the East Asian tigers used intensive government investment, both social spending and industrial policy, to put themselves ahead. And it worked, right? Now South Korea, which was roughly as poor as an average African country in the 60s, is as rich as a European country today. So like part of the reason I'm so hesitant to be stuff like, let's just slash all the social spending, let's just, consolidate all the departments and presumably give less money to them, is because part of that is key to building state capacity and long-term growth, to being a developed and eventually, therefore, a rich country.
So I'm going to have to intervene here. So with the Asian tigers, it's not really the case as you are explaining it. The South Korea and Singapore and maybe even Hong Kong are very pro-capitalist. Their intervention, it's like a third way kind of thing. Their intervention in the economy is state as an investor. Then invest in certain things. You can say, for example, Singapore invested in houses because they're a tiny island and stuff like that. But it's not necessarily the case that you can say these are high social spending countries by any stretch of the imagination. Now, if you want to talk about low growth, as someone from the UK, can I introduce you to the UK and Europe? We've had low growth for about 15 years now. We were essentially practicing degrowth at this stage.
And what happened in part all over Europe in the last decade after the recession was austerity. In virtually every country, the response
not true.
not all countries, but in most countries, pretty severe austerity occurred. It was actually the opposite in the
No,
US.
just the UK. It's just the UK.
Not just the UK.
Like austerity
mainly the UK.
in the UK?
No, it was like we had George Osborne for a while, and he like tried to cut spending for a while. But Germany didn't. We've had for example,
Germany, I think, is the only country in the EU that had spending flat during that old recession. The 2007-2008 recession.
But basically, in Europe, we've been trying to stimulate the countries. The European Union has spent 2 trillion euros, and it hasn't moved the needle on anything. Even if you take the Nordic countries, which are small countries, you have a situation where the Northern European countries are subsidizing the Southern European countries like Greece and Spain, who are not doing very well at all. Germany right now is shrinking, and they have to cut spending as a result because they don't have enough to. They're in a situation where Argentina is now. The shrinking is minimal, but it is not growing and is shrinking, and they have to, as a result of not growing, cut spending. So
I will say I feel again we're circular. Like, do you believe in neoclassical or Keynesianism? There is.
I invited a lot of economic nerds onto a panel, and you didn't expect this to happen. I don't know what you're talking about, right?
Your mistake.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, from what I've looked into, austerity didn't dramatically slash social spending in absolute terms. It mostly flattened or reduced the rate of growth pretty significantly, so that the percent of GDP went down 1 to 2 to 3, 4% across European countries. So austerity wasn't massive, but it was way larger than it was even in countries like the States. We did the opposite. We didn't do as large as we should have stimulus, but we still did a really large stimulus. And again, that's part of the reason that US growth rates have been better over the past decade. So all I'm just trying to say is again, it's more complicated than social spending equals high growth. Social spending makes developed people. It's an investment in human capital in long run growth, but short run growth involves stuff like industrial policy and stimulus. So what I'm worried is you're going to see shock therapy and a reduction of the ability to be a developed country in Argentina because he's cutting schools. Yeah.
No, actually, what Milei is suggesting is what is going to help with long-term growth. It's not necessarily. So if you say industrial policy, it depends on what you want to focus on. But ultimately, you're saying that does the government know where to? Is the government an all-knowing oracle and know where to put money or cut taxes or give incentives when and where? You need to give.
Doesn't have to be.
The private sector is what grows the economy. The government is basically taxing the private sector to pay for stuff it needs. And the less burden the government is, the bigger the private sector, the more it can grow.
Yeah, I'll let SDL respond, but then I'm gonna break this up, and we're gonna get to another question.
Oh dear, sorry.
Sure. I would just point to some of the research on stuff like public research as a clear counterexample. Every dollar invested in NASA yields something like $7 out in public research. There was a study of all public research in the U.S. 1960 to 2020 or so, and it found that public R&D had something like a 2 times higher spillover rate, meaning positive effects on other industries, positive effects on the economy beyond those of just the direct product. There's a lot of ways in which state investment is key to long-term growth, but that's apparently beyond the scope of the conversation, which is supposed to be about Javier Milei.
Well, I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole if you'd like. Milei is, in a lot of ways, kind of came out of nowhere, at least for the Westerners in the room, right? Like the Europeans, the Americans, etc. I know that he's been building a media presence online for years down there, right? So it's probably not new to all of you. But I guess I'd just ask, ignoring chat, what is the mood down there when it comes to the people of Argentina? Are they hopeful? Are they fearful? What's the kind of weather on the ground, if you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of peronistas and a lot of older people that are shitting their pants right now, or pissing their pants, as Milei would say. That are worried that things are going to, basically collapse. And there's people that believe the exact opposite, that this Milei guy is going to be actually the savior that we need. But you see, like, people are very uneasy because what he's proposing on what we're doing doesn't have any precedent. Like, for like a libertarian to take office, we don't know what he's actually going to run. And like, we've seen him campaign and we've seen him run and we've seen him moderate a little bit, but some of the things he believes and some of the things he proposes are pretty crazy. But people are pretty uneasy, I'd say.
So I confess I'm only passingly familiar with the governmental system down there. Has he appointed a cabinet or advisors or anything like that? How does that work down there?
Yeah, so he's named a few people. His Minister of Security is going to be Patricia Bullrich, which was the more moderate opposition candidate to Massa. And they kind of joined forces, and they're going to work together. But he hasn't said much about what his cabinet is going to be right now.
Okay, interesting. Well, you know what? We're kind of circling the drain here. So unless anyone, gun policy. What's his gun policy? Do you know?
He likes them.
He likes them?
He likes them. Yeah, I mean, he's full Second Amendment guy. He wants Argentines to be able to purchase guns more easily. Right now, you can purchase firearms, but it's kind of a very difficult thing, a difficult process. So there's a lot of bureaucracy to getting a firearm here. So
has he
you
made
don't really
any
see them.
specific proposals on how to make that easier? And what do you think of the the efficacy of those proposals?
I haven't seen him talk about that very much, just because that's not really what he's running with campaigning. I mean, he's just campaigning on the economy, basically. I don't know if anyone on this panel has seen him mention any policy about that.
I specifically asked one of my Argentine friends about this, and he said that there are no concrete proposals, but that he wants to streamline the process for someone to have access to firearms. I do think it's interesting. I mean,
so a poor hyperinflation or close to hyperinflation country is going to get more access to firearms.
I'll say this. If you know the history of Argentina, okay, so since World War II, there's been 2 periods of military junta rule, right? And I assume now Max isn't here, but SDL, and these are rightist juntas. There was one leftist junta in Peru, so I mean maybe they would be in favor of that, or at least not like super anti that. But generally speaking, in Latin America, there's when the military takes over, it is a right wing government. I do think it's interesting to ask them, do you think that an armed populace is good in a country where there's like military right wing juntas?
What I would say is that all the leftist guerrilla movements couldn't stop any of the military juntas, right? Like, there were armed populaces, they lost every time.
I mean, but they weren't well armed, right?
Well, but they wouldn't be well armed in a place where an average person can buy a Glock a little bit easier. Like, the things you need to take on modern governments go way beyond, like, even being able to buy an AR-15 or whatever. I think that, like, there is some merit.
What about Burma, though?
Well, let him answer the question. Go ahead, SDL.
I don't know enough about gun policy in Burma to say whether it had a role, but in general,
I mean, it's completely banned.
Well, then it seems like you can do a revolution even in a country where, like, if you're already at the point where you're willing to, like, kill government agents, generally you're willing to flout things like gun registration laws. So historically, that's meant you get foreign support, they ship in guns, and then you do the revolution. So, my view is that widespread civilian gun ownership doesn't seem to have any clear link to, like, stopping takeovers or whatever. It just seems to increase the amount of violence. So if there's an ability for people to use guns to, like, win their freedom, go ahead.
Okay. No. You finish your bit, and I'll say it.
If there's an example of, like, very low level people using guns to win their freedom, it might be stuff like I'm totally forgetting the name of them, but like Southern Mexico, Libertarian.
Yeah. The Well, now
Yeah.
you infected me with
with my inability to remember.
Yeah. Oh, what are they called? The Zapatistas.
Yeah, so
Which I totally support, by the way.
Well, so my point would just be that Zapatismo evolved in a context where like the cartels were often on the power level of governments already. Yeah. So you're already in like a almost not, it wasn't like open civil war, but you were in like a state where the government wasn't functioning. In general, it seems like guns don't work well against functioning governments. Like that'd be the simple way I put it. There's literally a paper on this from, I can send you it, but if the government decides the military to repress you, it reduces the rate that you win by like 12 times. The government is really good at killing people. So
I actually do agree with that. But I mean, the value of freedom, in my opinion, is infinite. So that kind of skews like and it certainly seems to skew all these people that, take up arms, against their governments. But I mean, certainly you would say like the people who took up arms against the Argentine military junta were justified at the very least. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a right to rebel. The argument I'm just giving is that that right, when executed, often loses unless you have like foreign state support. Just contemporarily, the only revolutions which have won in the past like 30 years, I think, are like not Tibet. Nepal, like Rojava and like the Chiapas, and those are like the only examples. And in all of those cases, it was like a civil war, and foreign state support. So it's like. It's really hard to win.
What foreign state supported the Zapatista?
No, sorry. That would be the case of like the cartels almost degrading the government to the point of like you can take over without having to displace a proper government. Okay. That's the point.
I mean, you could say that's one last. I mean, it's not quite.
One last question, then we'll kind of.
It's not civil war. That's fair.
Yeah, one last question, then we'll kind of wrap it up because we've been. I don't know, your SDL buddy, your partner had an internet issue, so unfortunately I was expecting a little more robust back and forth, but it is what it is. But let us consider 20 years from now, when we look back on this, Milei did it. His cuts, his policies, his economic style saved Argentina. Let's imagine that scenario. Do we think that this has repercussions on political, the political world in general? If we can now point to Argentina as a success story for libertarianism, do we see it or foresee it making a resurgence in Western countries or European countries or even Asian countries? What do we think?
I guess I can start.
Go ahead.
So technically, this has already happened. Argentina used to be very rich between 1853 and 1916, I think. Argentina was either top 10 or top 1 richest per capita country in the world. I think largely
third richest. Yeah.
Third. Okay. I think largely when it developed its constitution in 1853, it essentially copied the United States one. They had a period where they had a very small population. They had very high immigration during this time. They they exported a lot of wheat, a lot of bread, and they did very, very well during this sort of liberal or small government kind of thing, or at least the government hadn't developed to what it is today. And in a lot of countries, you can look at it. If you go back in their history, whether it's America or Sweden, they had periods of time when there were this sort of model where they made a lot of money, and then at some point someone said, shouldn't we invest in social programs, shouldn't we do these things, and those things downgraded and became poor, or the growth became poor over time. So I think even if Argentina succeeds, and unless it is a shining city on a hill, then people will just revert to their old cycles of, well, we have a lot of money, so let's start more social programs.
No change, really. Gotcha. Okay.
It would be a cycle, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. What do the rest of you think? Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a truly shining libertarian success story, of course it'll increase support for libertarianism worldwide. Conversely, if this looks more like what I think, like shock therapy, I think probably the opposite, that libertarian politics, especially in Latin America, will get a big setback. If it's a mixture, then, probably no big change. Which it seems what's likely what's going to happen is some privatization, some restriction of the currency. It doesn't seem like dollarization is even feasible. Like, it doesn't seem like he has the votes to do it or the authority to do it. So I don't know what's actually going to happen. It's probably going to be some mixture, and everyone's going to claim the successes are their fault and the failures are the other guy's fault, as usual. But I will say that, like, just a brief note on the historical thing. People love to point to Argentina as the world's richest or one of the richest countries. I believe the estimate for that usually comes from 1913. And part of the reason for that was because there was a really good market for wheat in Europe. And so Argentina, which was an export-dependent country with a bunch of very rich agriculturalists and a bunch of very poor, uneducated workers, was able to make bank off that. But again, they were a rich but not a developed country. They didn't have an educated citizenry. They didn't have the industrial machinery to get into the next stage. They were a bit like the South in the United States. And it is very obvious today, the South is way poorer than the North because you have to build a developed and a rich country at the same time.
I wonder why the South is such a poorer country. In 1670, in 1867.
Are we gonna argue this? Is this gonna happen? Are you going to say that the fact of Civil War and putting down those slavers in the Confederacy with fire and lead?
I mean, you don't even have to talk.
Can I just
even before the Civil War, the South was like not as wealthy, especially when you take into account like the wealth of slaves, when you count them as people and not as property. So
right,
yeah.
Can I just go back to SDL's point? Actually, during this, it's incorrect what you're saying. During this time, not only did the country develop in a very developed infrastructure in terms of trains, but they also invested a lot in education. And if I getting my numbers right, illiteracy went down from 70% to 20%, when at the time in Spain, comparing to Spain that used to control Argentina, had 59% illiteracy. So it isn't true. They did invest in their people as well as they grew.
Also important to point out, grain was not the major export of Argentina at the time. I'm sure, ignoring Chad, if he was an attentive student of Argentine history in high school, you could tell us what the major export was for Argentina.
No, I'm an immigrant. I'm actually Venezuelan. I've been here the past 5 years. I didn't take Argentine history courses like you guys did. I'm
beef.
sorry.
Enlighten us.
Well,
beef. That's what made Argentina rich. Was beef.
So agricultural work, which works well with like poorly educated, decentralized workers. That's like part of the story of Argentina.
Yeah. Texas was a very, very
poor
country, poor state, right?
Texas stayed poor until it got until it had the urbanization. There, even today, urbanization correlates with GDP. Like it is just a demonstrable fact that when you centralize, when you educate. Go ahead.
Listen. To a certain extent, I actually do agree with you. Okay, I'm not gonna get yes, but when you're exporting beef, one of the highest value meats available to the common man of all time, right? And to be fair, Texas was not exporting it to the world necessarily, but it was exporting it to the greater U.S., right? When Texas was able to access the Transcontinental Railroad, it was there was an explosion of economic growth, right? And at the same time, for the same reasons, this happened to Argentina. These great ranches were able to export during the early 20th century. And I do agree. I'm gonna be real with you. Yeah,
I don't care about beef. I do not care about the
you don't
ins
like
and
beef?
outs of beef.
You don't like beef? You want a $5 burger?
I think it's tangential to the point as a whole, right? I think we have
I
fallen down a rabbit hole or a cow hole. I'm not sure which to call it, but I am not sure that a lesson on beef agriculture is what my audience wants to see. However, I do want to give all of you individuals closing statements and closing thoughts. And then if people want to call in for a few minutes, we'll let them call in. And we'll see what goes on from there. But I wanted to just say that I think in a lot of ways, Milei is going to be a case study. Argentina, like it or not, is going to be a case study. Will these policies and these types of government work in combating hyperinflation, in combating rampant poverty and misery? We will find out. And I hope for the people of Argentina's sake that it does work. So that's all I got to say. Gang, thanks for watching this. If you've liked this content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're following this on Kick or on Twitch, hit that follow button. We're not ending the stream after this, but I want to give all these people an outro. So we're going to start in the reverse order we started. We're going to start with Sock Done Left, and then we're going to go around. Sock Done Left. Closing thoughts.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Sockdon Left. I stream. You can find me at sockdonleft.org/live. I'm a socialist. I would be upset to see Milei cut social spending, and in my view, it's probably going to lead to even more inequality, even more suffering in Argentina. It would be good for him to cut back on money printer and high inflation. Those things I think are good, but if Argentina is a case study, I don't think it's going to be a case study of like suddenly turning the country around and being immense growth. What Milei is actually going to do in power is going to be pretty moderate. What he's probably going to mostly focus on is trying to bring inflation down and privatizing companies. If he privatizes it in a way that hands it over to the workers, that could ironically be a case study for lefty economics and handing things over to workers. But if he does so in the standard way that his fan, he's a fanboy for Margaret Thatcher, it's going to be abysmal. He's going to barely cut inflation, but he's mostly just going to make poor people even poorer.
Guess we'll find out. Thanks for being here. I saw your buddy bailed on you, but hopefully his internet comes back at some point. Ignoring chat.
Yeah, so Milei, like I said, I'm not a libertarian. He wouldn't be my first choice, but I really wish him well. I truly wish him well because it's been a rough few years over here, and people vote for the change, and I support the will of the people. People overwhelmingly want to change from the status quo, and I think this kind of economic reboot is unfortunately what we need right now, and it's kind of the only really option that it's the last play that we have to get our economy in order before heading into hyperinflation. So I truly wish him well with privatizing companies that have been running at a deficit or have been just overspending, and hopefully brings a lot of the Argentine economy from outside the under the table. Like a lot of the Argentine economy is under the table, so hopefully cutting down on bureaucracy and stuff helps people get good jobs. That helps reduce unemployment, and things actually start taking a turn. I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic. I'm ignoring chat. I stream. I'm ignoring chat on everything, and I tweet as well.
Tweeting, the language of the gods at this point. So thank you again for agreeing to come on. I thought you'd add some context to the discussion that would be helpful. So I really appreciate you, especially last minute, just kind of agreeing to just jump on. So thank you. Next up, Corporal Adrian Shepard. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Adrian Shepard. I run Springtime Nation. I'm a libertarian content creator, and I'm very overall very optimistic about the Milei administration. I hope he cuts down on needed fat in the Argentine government. I am very optimistic that there is going to be a real turnaround in the economic growth of this country that has had so much economic pain inflicted on it for the past 30 years, even going back 50 years. Yeah, you can find me on springtimenations.org, etc. Springtime Nations on YouTube. Yeah, hail Milei.
Okay, well, thank you for coming. Appreciate you being here. Last but certainly not least, Philosophical Zombie Hunter. Go ahead.
Thank you, Wick. Thank you everyone for coming. SDL, ignoring chat, and Adrian, Wick for inviting me. I am optimistic about Milei. I think I just want to quickly say with regards to SDL, I'm sure you don't want to cut social spending and things of that nature, but something does have to change. Like either the economy grows or you cut spending. You can't leave it the way it is because inflation itself is hurting the poor even by your standards. I am very optimistic with regards to Milei. I am sure that dollarizing the economy, and I do believe he has a mandate for doing that, despite him not having a lot of support in his Congress/Senate equivalent. I do believe he has a mandate. So what I am hoping to see is more trade, more investment in Argentina from the outside world, excitement about what's happening in Argentina. The people of Argentina have a very high human capital. They're very well educated. They're very willing to work hard and innovate. So I'd be very happy for them if this change helps them out and shows the rest of the world that it can be a very good economic system.
Okay, and with that, gang, I'm going to send you all off. I will see you guys later. Thank you again for coming.
And would it be?
Gang, I'm not going to lie to you. That was painful. That was painful, okay? It was an interesting enough topic, but there's just too many unknowns at this point, right? We had a lot of economic nerds on who use terms that I don't think most of you are familiar with, and I could sense your frustration. It's a lot, but I do appreciate them from coming on, and I do appreciate you guys for sticking around. Thank you for the subs, by the way. SDA, Shaved Dogs Arse. Thank you for the 5 kick gifted subs. Thank you to those who donated bits. Thank you to Zephyr Hash and to Feder Methodist. Thank you to the super chatters that we've had today. Zephyr Hash was also a super chatter. Fondue and Lesson Cell. There's a lot to be said about foreign policy, right? And we have a lot going on when it comes to that subject. I guess my question for you, dear chat, is do you want more of these types of discussions with more kind of nitty-gritty stuff, or do you want less? What do you think? One's in chat for more, two's for different kind of things. Like we don't like this, we want different kind of things. So one's for this, two's for less. Yes, with Katie showing up, what are you talking about? You don't care about what I want? Intense Complex, you DM me like 20 times a day. 20 times a day you DM me with the weirdest stuff, okay? It's really hard to parse. I don't know what conversations you're listening to or what you're talking about half the time. It's just out of the blue, you come into my DMs and you drop some stuff. Apparently you're really mad at my mods. Okay? I get it. I understand. You're going to have to take it up with my mods. You can't take it up with me. I don't mod my own Discord because I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to deal with moderation. I don't want to deal with that headache. I used to micromanage. I used to do it all, right? I couldn't create content because I was dealing with all of you all the time, going on and on and on about how so-and-so has wronged you and they must pay, right? And then you enter my DMs, and not you specifically, but everyone would enter my DMs saying, so did you hear what so-and-so said about me? Oh, you got to ban them. You have to censor them. You have to destroy them. I was like, you know what? I don't need that in my life right now. I don't need it at all. I am going to shunt that off to my wonderful mod team and my wonderful admin team who deals with that. And I only deal with when they can't handle it or when there's a substantive disagreement with my team. They kick it up to me on occasion, then I'll make a decision, right? So yeah, I just don't know what to tell you. But thanks for hanging out, I guess. Does anyone want to chat real quick? Can you do a panel with furries from your community? Mooncake! I don't have furries in my community. That's slander. It's libel. It's vicious. It's a lie. Furries in my Wick is furry free. Okay. Wick is furry free. Okay. The Wick community. There are no furries. Any rumors of furries are an exaggeration or a lie designed to destroy my reputation. And I won't stand for it. Okay. It's just not okay. It's not okay. Milei is a furry, or at least he's a cosplayer. I won't say he's a furry, but he's at least a cosplayer. That's bad enough. Okay, that's bad enough. But I have a soft spot in my heart for cosplayers. Okay, soft spot in my heart. So I'll let it slide. I understand that we don't want to cut social spending. I think that there are a lot of very important roles the government can play in providing for its citizens that just can't be done, or at least can't be trusted into the hands of the private sector. That said, there does come a point if a program is not working, if a program cannot sustain itself and isn't providing the help that people need in a way that's cost effective, that you kind of have to just either reform the program to make it work, like actually put forth the metrics that improve people's lives, or you just have to get rid of it. One of the two. Lactoid, why are you booing me? Why are you booing? Lactoid, I've seen what makes you cheer. Your boos mean nothing to me. Zephyr Hash for $2. Am I a furry if I love your beard? No, I am a human adult male. That does not make you a furry. That kind of makes you a little gay. But that's okay to be a little gay. Okay, it's okay. No judgment, right? And just a little, right? Who doesn't love a nice beard? Okay. Man, adult man, Toby-Wan Kenobi. Yes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Borrow more money for tax cuts to billionaires and then cut social spending. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Is that what you're saying? Look, I don't like tax cuts to billionaires either. I think that we should tax the rich more in certain areas. And by the rich, I'm not talking about 100,000 heirs. I'm talking about billionaires specifically, right? There does come a point where we do have to tax them. Yes, absolutely. We should be. I think we should reform the way inheritance works. I think we should reform the way that wealth is grown in this country to spread it around a little bit, because we are having an increase in the wealth gap, right? And that is going to lead to frustration and problems. It's one of the reasons, even though the economy right now is doing quite well overall, there is this disparity between the haves and the have-nots that is creating a lot of tension that threatens us as a country, as a nation, in this time of kind of social upheaval, social unrest, that we really need to kind of figure out how to deal with. I am by no means an economist. I want to be clear, right? So how to fix it? I'm not entirely sure. But I do see the results, the effects, I should say, the effects that this is having on the way we interact with one another, the way we interact societally, etc. And I think that it's very negative. But speaking of positive interactions, gang, okay, it is coming up to be the end of the month. And as I do at the end of the month, every time, I am asking for your donations. I am asking for you to sub to the channel, to donate to the channel, to give money, to either super chats, bits, gift subs. All of that really helps. At the end of the month is when they tally up how much I make, and that money goes to my wallet to pay for my necessities, right? To pay my bills, my electricity, to pay for the yummy food that I eat, and also for games and stuff that I like to play. And all of this is helpful. All of this is something that if you like this content, if you enjoy what I do for you, the content that I bring for you, if you got $5, you got $20, you got $50, throw it my way. It would very much be appreciated. What do we have coming up this week? A few things. So tomorrow, we're going to go live a little earlier. So we went live. We always go live at around 6 p.m. Eastern. We're going to go live a little earlier tomorrow at about 5 p.m. Eastern. At 5:30, we are having an individual Dario come on to explain open borders to me and to sell me on the idea of open borders, of unrestricted immigration. Um, he has about an hour, and that's the hour he can come, and he's pretty knowledgeable on the subject, or at least he says he is. So I'm going to come and have him on to hear him out. I would also like if there is someone, maybe Lactoid, who I'm not actually sure what Lactoid's position is on border control, but if anyone wants to come on after and advocate for more controlled borders, that would be helpful as well. And then you can try to sell me on that particular subject. It's up to you. If you don't want to, that's fine. Last but not least, tomorrow we have an individual who is has a master's, I believe, in let me just read it out. Hold on. Let me get there. Give me a second, gang. Give me a moment. Individual by the name of Culture Mania is going to come on and talk to me about Middle Eastern culture and analysis. They live in the Middle East and they're very passionate about it. They did their master's in sociology of culture, and according to them, the Israel-Palestine discussion is lacking because we never talk about the cultures within the region. So after we're done with the borders tomorrow, we're going to have them on to discuss that for a brief time. So interesting show tomorrow. We have an hour or two of borders, and then we have an hour or two of culture. That should be fun. Wednesday, we are having an all-woman panel with Mooncake will be there, Lav will be there, Seventh will be there, Sasha Edits will be there, Allison will be there, right? And we'll have who else are we having on this panel? Hold on, give me a second. Oh yes, Ice Beans. Ice Beans will be joining us too. And we're going to be talking about what is wrong with men from the women's perspective. We talked about it from the men's perspective on Friday. Great show, by the way. If you missed it, it's live on my YouTube. You can check that out. This Wednesday, though, we're going to let the women have a crack at it. Women will be talking and telling me why men are bad. Should be interesting. Should be fun. Should be amazing. I am excited to hear all the ways that I have failed society. And I hope that you are too. Thursday, we're going to have a gentleman on. We're going to be doing call-ins, and we're going to have a gentleman on who's going to call in and tell me why I'm wrong on everything. He was very passionate about how I have developed brainworms and been propagandized, so I invited him on to talk to me about it and see how that goes. This is Wick's way of us men throwing money at him in rage, by the way, to get super chats. Yes, it is. So I will, again, read everything that you pay me money to read, as long as you pay me enough. Like, if you give me 10 cents, I won't do it. But it's got to be at least a couple bucks. And I'll read what you want, and I'll ask the questions to the panel as time allows and as the conversation allows me input into it. Wick do hot tub streams. I want to make money. I don't want to lose viewerships, okay? That's all I gotta say, okay? I want people to come into my stream and want to stay in my stream, and that is why I don't do hot tub streams. But I appreciate the suggestions. If you got them, keep them coming. I'll take more. But I reserve the right to veto any really bad suggestions, such as that one. Yeah. Any other thoughts or any other things that people want to talk about with me, right? Any other issues to be brought forth before the stream to deal with, to address? I know today was a little bit shorter than we usually do, but again, Max dropping out like after 10 minutes. I know his internet stopped working. I get it. I am trying to get Max on. Oh, speaking of Max, Max, if you're listening, or if you listen to this after any of your viewers are seeing this, I want to talk to you for a bit about the discourse, your little drama that happened. I have some folks in my community that have some issues, some bones to pick with you, and they would like the chance with me moderating to bring you on and to discuss them with you. I think it'd be good content. I think it'd be interesting. I know that you might be tired of going through the drama right now, but hey, strike while the iron's hot, buddy. Needs must while the devil drives. If you wanna, you got to answer for your sins. You got to atone. I'm gonna be real with you. I don't know what the drama is, and I'm trying my very best not to find out because it involves words that I never want to learn the meaning of. But I think that actually aids my ability to moderate the discussion rather than takes away from it. I think that it'll allow me to kind of get to the hearts of the matter, and instead of being sucked into weird rabbit holes of definitions and things like that. Tenflix, whip your whole asshole out. Now that is content. Bryce, come on in. Sure, we can have you in for a minute. What's up, Bryce?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there were a couple things that really stood out. Oh, wait, let me
You got a
show.
camera for us, or are you gonna be facing?
Yeah, I can give you a camera. Give me 1 second.
Take your time. Take your time. It's not like you're live or anything.
Yeah, not like I'm live. Not like I'm wasting your time and there's like a Jeopardy clock.
Okay, we're losing viewers as we speak. But go on.
I just wasn't expecting to go on camera, but give me a second.
He's busy, gang. He's getting
Oh my
things
God,
done.
I fucked my back up deadlifting and it's been hurting ever since. I think this is fine. Okay, let me turn this on. Where am I? Where the fuck am I? On camera? There we go. Okay.
Okay, hello.
I haven't shaven, so please forgive me. Hair's a mess, but I heard things earlier on in the Milei discussion that really kind of triggered me. One of the key things, like I'm gonna briefly go into the like economic stuff, and I'll answer any questions that you or chat have because I study economics. I've been doing it for years now. I'm almost done my degree. The key thing was they said that he came from a background of econometrics. The problem there is that you can be the dumbest person in the world and go through undergrad economics or like econometrics and then come out and be like, oh, I know econometrics. I know, because the point they were trying to say is like he had a background in like the quantitative side, like modeling all these things. But there's actually I don't know if he's like Italian or like South American, but somebody went through the specific work because Millet posted like his notebook and some of his notes on some of his theories and ideas. And they went through his like methodology and was like, this dude has like no idea what he's doing quantitative, like in terms of like actual like technical work in economics. He has absolutely no idea what it is, and he's just overflowing people with like really technical jargon. And on paper, a lot of his stuff just doesn't add up. Like it doesn't. Somebody went through trying to like replicate his stuff, and his main point. There's a paper he posted in English like this year or last year. That's literally like he hates socialism. Like for whatever reason, this dude is maybe it's like the Argentinian like experience and like history, but he's got like a hard on for hating socialism. So his paper is like capitalism, socialism, and the neoclassical trap. And he just throws in like mumbo jumbo. Like it's almost meaningless. He's literally just like, well, there's a problem with the idea of like reaching an equilibrium. Like he takes this weird abstract problem with the notion of general equilibrium, which is kind of like a key thing that or like a key idea in economics. You want to achieve like the equilibrium. So if you can imagine a chart, right? I'm not going to open up MS Paint and like bore you guys to death, but if you imagine a chart, right? You've got the x-axis and the y-axis, right? You got two lines, right? Yeah, the two lines, you want to find that point. Basically, like a lot of the economic stuff is you want to find the point where the two lines intersect, and we consider that like optimal. And he has like ideas. And there's this idea of like Pareto optimality, where no decision can be made where that will benefit. So let's say like you, I, and chat, right? There's no decision that any of us can make that would make any of us better off.
Yes,
so he has, like,
can. Sub to the channel and we'll all be better off. Bryce will be better off because I'll invite him more because having him on gets me subs. I'll be better off
Sure.
because you give me your money, and you'll be better off because you won't be burdened by materialism, and we'll be able to focus on your families and things that you actually should be caring about instead of filthy lucre. Okay, so that is how we can all be benefited. We talk about that point of equilibrium. That is the point of equilibrium, the point where you give me money. That is the
Yeah.
point that all economists, past, present, and future, have been leading or have led to, is giving me your money. But carry on.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. Like, so he doesn't really know what he's talking about with like econometrics. You look at his past work, like it's really just like in the best core comparison you make is Richard Wolff, right? Richard Wolff, people will say is an economist, but he's really just a historian. So with Milei, I'd say he calls himself an economist, but he's really just like a sociologist. Like that's really the gist of it,
Worst of the worst. Oh, okay, fair enough.
right? Yeah,
I'll confess I haven't read his works. I
the
know that,
majority is in Spanish, so
yeah, I don't read Spanish, so fair enough. But no, thanks for coming on and clarifying that. I won't keep
yeah,
you
no
too
problem.
long. But
No, it's, yeah, other key points was just like all the things that he's proposing, like getting rid of the central bank. One of the key things is that inflation is impacted by the idea of what's called inflation expectations. So when consumers and experts and markets all collectively expect a higher rate of inflation, this actually ends up yielding higher inflation. So one key thing that the central bank is able to do is that if they exist. They can do something what the Fed and Bank of Canada and basically every central bank does is every quarter, every 8 to 10 times a year, they release like a report, right? Like a monetary policy report, which includes something called forward guidance, which is literally saying like, hey, this is our outlook. Here's our modeling. Here's our forecasting. We don't think we're going to increase interest rates. We don't think that we're going to decrease interest rates. And by doing so, this communicates to the markets, consumers, and experts that you can either be bearish or you can be bullish, which is basically like you think prices are going to go up or you think prices are going to go down. Sorry, other way around. But if you get rid of the central bank, then you're left with the government to just make those announcements, and that's not going to carry the same kind of weight because you no longer by dollarizing. Because there's a thing called the policy trilemma, right? It's basically a triangle, and in this triangle you can only have two of the three options, right? At the top, you can have the capital inflow, which is basically a capacity to control investors coming in, money going out, exports coming in, imports going out. Sorry, other way around. Exports going out, imports coming in. And then you have the exchange rate, which is typically a floating exchange rate in most countries. 'Cause it allows you to like use like interest rates and things like that to affect the value of your dollar, the impact of like exports, imports. And then you have independent monetary policy or like discretionary monetary policy. So if you create a fixed interest rate, that is removing that independent monetary policy completely off the table. So they're not able to do anything whatsoever. So if you have some kind of shock to the economy and you're pegged to the US dollar, then there's nothing you can do. Like you just have to inherit the shocks, right? Like if something happens, like when they dollarize, which the big problem with that is that one of Milei's key guys has come out and said, we don't have the reserves. Like we can't dollarize. It's physically impossible for us to dollarize because dollarizing involves the process of them spending their foreign cash reserves to buy domestic currency. So that causes deflation, right? The value of that peso goes down way, big time. And then you have a bunch of US currency in your economy, right? So that's dollarizing. But that's almost like irreversible. Once you begin institutional changes where people get their paychecks in USD, everything begins to happen in USD, you can almost never reverse that. Like the countries that we can look at that are dollarized right now, if they wanted to like de-dollarize, it would be it's prohibitively expensive. Like it would fuck their economy. And especially for somebody like Argentina, there's almost no chance of them being able to come back from that. So I threw a shit ton of information at you, but
cool. I'm glad you got it all out of your system. You feel better?
I do feel better because it is honestly it's the only thing that really agitates me lately is all these libertarians that are like, woo, yeah, freedom, finally. It's so agitating.
I hate when other people are happy too. Bryce, thanks for coming
Right?
on. Thanks,
Yeah, no problem.
I do not. Look, that stuff bores me to tears. I know it's important. I know it matters. I know it's very, very hard to get right in a lot of ways. But yo, like when we're talking about the imports and the exports and the floating averages and things like that, and man, cool. There's a reason I don't usually do economic topics, gang. There's a reason that I stick to the broader stuff. I stick to the cultural stuff. I stick to the more kind of like philosophical questions of the day kind of thing. It's because the ins and outs and the specifics of monetary policy ain't my jam, gang. It's just not my jam. I'll be real with you. It's something that not only am I uneducated on, so there's that, but I have very little interest in. I want money. I want to have more money. That's the interest I have. But yeah, fair enough. Okay, gang. I think that's it for today. Remember, tomorrow we're coming in early, so get here early. We're going live around 5 p.m. Eastern, and then my guest will be arriving at 5:30 p.m. But I wanted to give a little extra cushion room to just talk to you guys for a bit. So for now, we are going to raid out into Prime Kai. Make sure that you spam the subs if you got them, or not spam the subs, spam the emotes if you got them. Let them know it's a hate raid, and we'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.